From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the McLaughlin Group. I'm Tom Rogan. This week's panelists are the familiar faces of Clarence Page, Eleanor, Clift, and Pat Buchanan. And our guest this week is Alexander Heffner from PBS. Welcome, Alexander. On that note, we shall get to our first issue, which is issue 1, Hunter's emails.
The New York Post this week reported on an email from a senior Burisma official to Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son. A Ukrainian energy firm, Burisma, formerly employed Hunter. That raised eyebrows in that Vice President Biden later pressured Ukraine to fire an investigator who was looking into Burisma's dealings. In Biden's defense, that investigator is generally viewed as corrupt. Still, one email from April 2015, 1 year after Hunter joined the Burisma board, appears to undermine Joe Biden's assertion that he never spoke to Hunter about his Ukraine business dealings. The email, originally acquired by Trump campaign ally Rudy Giuliani, involves the Burisma official thanking Hunter Biden for inviting him to the United States and meeting with his father, Joe. But hold that thought, because the Biden campaign says the meeting never happened, which begs the question, is this an issue of dirty tricks in lieu of an October surprise, or a story deserving of more serious media attention? The story continues, because social media giants Facebook and Twitter then censored the New York Post reporting, suggesting that it might contain misinformation. Republican senators are now threatening to subpoena Twitter and Facebook executives.
So, Pat, we also saw some more reporting later in the week in terms of potential China relationships, and Hunter Biden traveling with Joe Biden in 2013, gets a business license 10 days after, and now we see emails from 2017 talking about an unknown big man. But regardless of the established facts of the story, isn't a secondary point here an extraordinary example of media malpractice and social media censorship in the unwillingness really to even engage with the story? I've found that quite astonishing over the past 2 days. Your thoughts?
It is remarkable. There's also the alleged $3.5 million that Hunter got from the wife of the mayor of Moscow, who's a friend of Vladimir Putin's. Now imagine if Eric Trump had turned up with $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow. The press wouldn't be covering anything else. It would have confirmed everything. Impeachment automatically would be demanded. Now about this Hunter Biden story, he got $83,000 a month from that Ukrainian corrupt energy company. And Joe Biden says, I never knew anything about it. I never talked to my son about it. Now, if there's truth to this report of these emails that came out apparently of a computer, I think it was in a pawn shop in Wilmington, Delaware, then Joe Biden's own credibility would be on the line, and perhaps much more. But I think we got to wait. And here's where the media should be all over. They should be affirming or questioning or checking on this thing, because if true, as we used to say in journalism in my days, if true, it's a hugely important story. If not, it is an interesting story as to who is putting this all together.
Right. Eleanor.
The media are all over it. It's a conspiracy theory. It's Russian disinformation. It's being peddled through Rudy Giuliani, who has zero credibility on any of this. No media outlet has been able to confirm any of the so-called details, including the New York Post, which hasn't seen the computer, and the social media companies are reacting responsibly. You don't publish and peddle a lie so that it gains traction. And boy, the media apparatchiks on the right are out there hammering away on this. It's a desperate search for an October surprise to rescue a president who looks on his way to be headed to an historic defeat.
Alexander, though, Eleanor suggests that it was appropriate for Facebook and Twitter to restrict access to the reporting. And how can that be compatible with Twitter and Facebook's approach towards the Russia collusion reports that came out successively for 2 years and then effectively came, at least at the prosecutorial standard, which was the defining element, to nothing? And secondly, we do not have from Hunter Biden a denial that these emails came from him. So in that sense alone, surely there is something worthy of investigation here. After all, the media quite rightly pointing out allegations that the Trump family has engaged in cronyism through the presidential office.
I think that social media have been largely irresponsible from 2015 on, and that they shouldn't be immune from scrutiny, and that they are publications that ought to have the same amount of legal liability. And that's what they are. And any American is able to create a counterpoint or counterpart to a Twitter or a Facebook, and to allow the dissemination of disinformation or unverified or non-authenticated information. So it's finally raising the point that we can have social media that are responsible, that ban conspiracy theorists and extremist groups like QAnon, or we can have a social media that are gateways to that extremism and hyper-partisan and even militant discourse.
So Alexander, to push you on that a little bit, would you be in favor then on that basis of banning some of the journalists who reported things in relation to Trump and collusion that turned out to be totally unverified?
No, my attitude towards it is everybody should have the right to own information in their marketplace. And if their marketplace is Twitter and they think they are being wronged on Twitter because there's something that they're disputing, then they should have a channel to pursue that with Twitter or with Facebook. And if that is a legal jurisdiction question, that should be corrected.
Clarence, your thoughts?
Well, you know, Tom, we've all talked about, when's the October surprise going to come? Nobody says, will there be one anymore? We just say, when's it going to come? And in what form will it take? And when I saw this New York Post piece, I said, maybe this is it. And Rudy Giuliani's already tied into it, right? I read the piece. Tom, there's no there there. The word nothing burger was invented for stories like this. I was reminded of Ben Bradley and All the President's Men when Woodward Bernstein kept coming in with more exclusives, and he kept shaking his head saying, you haven't got it. That's how I felt about the New York Post. They haven't got it.
But Clarence, and you know, wait, but I want to push Clarence on this because, you know, I do think this story, maybe there is no there, but isn't there surely on the basis of the emails we have in terms of Chinese Communist Party owning economic ownership and hundreds of thousands of dollars, the potential of a similar essentially extraction for favors, isn't there at least there enough to ask if there's something there and not simply say immediately there's nothing there?
You missed my point, Tom. I never said don't ask questions. That's what we do as journalists. I'm saying they didn't ask enough questions at the Post, or they went in with these speculations still hanging in the air. That's not responsible journalism. But let me get to that Jack Dorsey and Twitter question. This is how this whole mess started with Twitter and Facebook trying to be their own editors when they actually they're just out to make money. They just want to be utilities, privately owned public utilities. Well, that just doesn't work in this day and age, this political age. You can weaponize misinformation. That's what's happening here. We can see the Trump campaign is weaponizing this, and they are on my way over here. I heard a Trump surrogate talking about outrageous First Amendment violation and blah blah blah. No, there's no First Amendment. The federal government is not telling you what to publish or not publish.
I mean, Clarence mentioned weaponized information. Who makes that call? I mean, these individuals, they take incredible individuals, I think the press secretary of the president, and started editing what they had to say and censoring it and dumping it off because they said it's a phony issue. Who decides that? Who elected these people to do this? These people are acting as censors without authorization.
All right, Clarence, you go next, and then I'll go to Eleanor.
Hey, you're a journalist. I'm a journalist. You know, we would be very PO'd if somebody came in from the government to tell us what to publish. That's not the issue here. We're talking about responsible journalism and whether Trump can get a lot of free publicity off of a non-story because it's October.
All right, Eleanor.
Right. Trump is happy for us to talk about this because we're not talking about the spike in COVID cases and the fact that he has not been able to do anything to curb the virus. But to equate this with the call that there was Russia collusion and claim that none was found. Go back and read the report. There was lots of collusion. There was not a criminal conspiracy. Big difference. Putin won big in 2016. We don't want a repeat of that. And I think the social media companies are doing the right thing to prevent this from getting out there. And Trump, well, they're not preventing it, but to curb it.
Okay, Alexander, and then we'll move on to the next issue.
Look, it's the marketplace of ideas. We've had this discussion before. If you don't want tobacco in your cigarettes and you want to choose a different agent of carcinogen or not carcinogen, that's your choice. And Facebook and Twitter are going to operate in a certain way to preempt disinformation. They took a strong stand here. I don't think we've seen the October surprise, frankly. We haven't seen Russian active measures in the full way that we did in 2016. Remains to be seen if they are forthcoming.
Okay, let's move on to our second issue, which is issue 2. ACB goes to the Senate.
If they outlawed same-sex marriage, there'd have to be a case challenging it. And for the Supreme Court to take it up, you'd have to have lower courts going along and saying, we're going to flout Obergefell. And the most likely result would be that lower courts, who are bound by Obergefell, would shut such a lawsuit down and it wouldn't make its way up to the Supreme Court.
Seeking confirmation to the Supreme Court bench, Amy Coney Barrett testified before the U.S. Senate this week. The judge's intellect and poise won plaudits from Republicans. But Democrats warned that Coney Barrett might overturn gay rights and abortion-related laws.
Eleanor, it seems to me that the partisan battle lines are established as they were. There was no great faux pas moment. Amy Coney Barrett, universally it seems regarded as a bright mind and good person. How much, though, do you think there really is a risk that if she is confirmed, some of this landmark legislation potentially would be overturned, or rulings that would be overturned?
She's extremely intelligent and poised woman, and she made it through the hearings, hours and hours of hearings, very skillfully. But we do know more about her than we have known about any other conservative nominee to the court, except for Judge Bork. We know she's been an activist on reproductive rights. She signed petitions. She's called abortion horrific. We know what she has said about how the court ruled on the Affordable Care Act, as she believes. She questioned Judge Roberts that he pushed to the extreme the measure in order to save the statute. On gay rights, she is Judge Scalia's student. So look what he had to say on that issue, and you know where she stands. Show me one thing she has said or one ruling that doesn't line up with her ideology. So I think she joins Clarence Thomas on the far right of the court, and it's the hearings were basically a rote occasion because the Republicans have the votes. It's a raw power play. She will be confirmed at an appointment by a president who is likely to be historically discredited, and by a Senate who looks like it's on the verge of being voted out.
Pat, do you seriously think that, as much as Eleanor makes a compelling point there in terms of the judicial and personal record of Amy Coney Barrett on these issues, that a Supreme Court with her on the bench would overturn some of the gay marriage law, essentially that being legal across the country, and fundamentally overturn Roe v. Wade? Do you think that would happen?
Well, the gay marriage thing, no. Look, there are not millions, there's probably tens of thousands of homosexual marriages or gay marriages have been legally. And do I think that the Supreme Court's going to come in and overturn whatever it is, Obergefell,
yeah,
and invalidate some of these marriages in states where they were outlawed? No, I don't. As for Roe v. Wade, I don't think it's going to be overthrown, but I do think this. If there's a case that comes up, say Louisiana's got a restrictive law on abortion, and that goes to the court, and it goes up through the courts, and the appellate courts say it doesn't invalidate Roe, and you get it to the Supreme Court, you could have the issue there. But look, even if Roe v. Wade were overturned, what's going to happen. Before Roe v. Wade, both Reagan's California and Nelson Rockefeller's New York had extremely liberal abortion laws. States that want, freedom of choice, so to speak, are going to get that. And states that want restriction on abortions for various reasons, suffering, etc., are going to get that. So it goes back to the people, goes back to a democratic policy. What in heaven's name is wrong with letting the people decide this issue in the states where they live?
Clarence.
Well, I think Pat is largely correct insofar as what we can expect from the court that's on the horizon here. By the way, does anybody miss the days when a Supreme Court appointee had to pull out because it was learned that he had smoked marijuana at a party in his youth? I mean, yes, children, we used to be that particular and that nonpartisan about these things. Now we are so partisan that you can just predict ahead of time where the votes are going to go, unless there's some big revelation about, I don't know, pornography or something. In any case, it would take quite a big revelation to change what is on the way. And I think that one thing about the abortion issue, though, over the years, it's fascinated me how liberals have not been as excited traditionally about the Supreme Court as conservatives have, partly because Roe v. Wade did fire up conservatives in the early 70s, and it helped them to come together behind Ronald Reagan. I mean, a lot of changes occurred over the years. So this is the tail end of, what, a 40-some-odd year, 50 years, excuse me, almost march by the right. And now maybe we're going to see the kind of backlash from the left where they're going to care about the Supreme Court. We will see, but I think that'll be a deterrent against this court making rulings that are too far to the radical right.
Alexander.
Clarence and Tom are exactly right. This is going to become a state question. We're going back in a time machine, but we don't know how far back we're going. And it's really remarkable that the Republicans were afraid in kind of beating around the bush in the nomination process. They weren't standing up for what Pat just articulated, which is that they believe this should be a decision that is democratically determined in each of our 50 states. Well, at least express that as your motivation in appointing this jurist to the Supreme Court. But we're talking about not just the ACA and reproductive rights that are in jeopardy. We're talking about any ruling, and maybe the most landmark rulings of the Warren Court. We're talking about Brown. We're talking about Miranda. We're talking about one person, one vote. Do you
seriously think segregation is going to come back? School segregation?
Well, it's not going to be in a decision necessarily that is explicitly overturning Brown, but the essence of segregationism can be conveyed without overturning it. I mean, her failure to acknowledge Griswold as super precedent and the right to contraceptive care, was rather astonishing. I think that even if she acknowledges Brown as super precedent, and that was really the only decision she was willing to do, it shows how much is in jeopardy from the last century of jurisprudence.
All right, we've got to move on because we have another big issue, which is issue 3, the trail.
I did more in 47 months than Joe Biden did in 47 years. He forgot Mitt Romney's name. He didn't know what state he was in. And he said, today he's a proud Democrat running for the U.S. Senate.
He told Bob Woodward that he didn't want to panic the American public. Americans don't panic. Trump panicked.
With Election Day just 2.5 weeks away, the Trump and Biden campaigns exchange sharp blows. The polls continue to suggest that Biden leads in the majority of the so-called swing states. But as each campaign enters its final run, the evolving narratives are clear. Biden, Trump says, is a forgetful puppet of the far left. Trump, Biden says, is an incompetent liar.
Clarence, 2.5 weeks to go thereabouts. What do you see that could shake this up? Because the analytical assessments of the polling suggest that Joe Biden really running strong in this final stage.
I'm just counting the days, Tom. I mean, really, is anything going to shake this up after what we've been through already? I mean, I've never heard so many people on the right and the left saying, let's get it over with already. The fact is, most people have their views very deeply baked in. And your implication is correct. It would take a heck of a blockbuster to change things now in either direction. But we really do have a situation in which I love those sound bites you pulled off. They're now just pulling out bigger insults against each other and their memories and speech patterns. I mean, for heaven's sake. But this is this is kind of that stage of the campaign now, and people will find ways to forgive whatever shortcomings their guy has, or someday gal, and or to say the opposite about the other side.
Eleanor.
Trump can run, but he can't hide from the coronavirus. And his latest approach in the rallies, where he is strutting around, plunging maskless into the crowd, saying he's vulnerable, he's cured, asking suburban women, please like me. I don't have time to be, polite. I can't be politically correct, but I've saved your neighborhoods from integration. I've saved your neighborhoods. I mean, these are appeals that are not going to work in the age of COVID. And going after older people and expecting them to say, okay, the virus is no big deal, when there's evidence all around every day of how dangerous this virus is. And he gets to get medevaced to Walter Reed and gets pumped full of fancy medicines, and he's okay, and he acts like, oh, no big deal.
There are 8 battleground states, Tom. It's Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. In 2016, how many did Trump win? He won all 8 of them. He now has to win 6, and without Pennsylvania, probably 7 of those states. It's an uphill battle. He's behind in the national polls in some cases by double digits, but he is much closer in the battleground states. And that's where this is going to be fought out. But I think you do need an event of some kind to turn things around. The effort to portray Biden as sort of out of touch and having lost it, and even as one correspondent said, respected correspondent, senile, it has not fully taken hold, although many people have problems with Biden. So you got to do one of 2 things. You got to expose his incapacities, or you've got to tie him to the radical left agenda, which the American people don't want.
Alexander.
Oh, I think it has been done at those dual attacks.
It hasn't worked.
And if you listen to the Senate debates, most of the vulnerable Republican senators, including those on the Judiciary Committee, are using similar talking points as the president. So lurching to the extreme battle cry of Trump and Trumpism. But there's no room for complacency. As Pat indicated, those are the critical states. It's not going to be tallied on the basis of popular vote. And at any given moment, there could be an event that precipitates a change in trajectory. But I would also caution us to realize that it doesn't necessarily take an event. We have this strange question about the veracity of polling and whether in 2020 it can be trusted. And I don't know that it can be.
Predictions, Pat.
The Russians and the Turks are at swords point in Libya, at swords point in the civil war in Syria, and now they're coming close to swords point in the war in the southern Caucasus between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Keep an eye on that war there because it could spread, not only intensify.
Very good. Eleanor.
The Supreme Court hasn't taken a gun rights issue in 10 years, and they've let the lower courts basically pass a whole raft of gun regulations in local states and localities. Those cases will now make their way to the Supreme Court because they're convinced that they've got an ally in Judge Barrett, and she will rule like Justice Scalia did, basically enhancing gun rights and more open carry laws, even in the face of growing vigilante violence in the country.
Okay, Alexander.
even if Vice President Biden is elected, and if there is not a Democratic Senate, if McConnell and the Republicans hold on, there will be major changes in the composition of the Senate Democratic leadership, which has been far less productive and fruitful than its counterparts in the House. A Biden win alone is not going to protect Feinstein and Schumer.
All right, interesting. Clarence.
Let me predict that we're going to see a strong showing in the battleground states, which will tend to lean toward Joe Biden, being able to carry the race by enough points that there won't be a whole lot to question after Election Day.
My prediction is that the coming week, we'll see quite unprecedented in terms of what we have seen before, people not obeying coronavirus lockdowns, especially in Britain and France. I think the unrest there will reflect civilian democracies. At some point, people decide they've had enough, even if there are compelling reasons to stay indoors. Thank you for watching. We will see you next week.